Well, hello and welcome to the Super Connector Show, where I'm delighted to be joined by Andy Bartlett, who is the founder and CEO of Roam, which is a local first search engine. Hi, Andy, how are you doing?
All good, thank you, Paul. Thank you for having me. It's a
No,
privilege to be here.
yeah, no, it's great. We've had some really good conversations recently, and I really love the way you think and all the work that you're doing to support local businesses and the high street in particular. So do you want to start by just telling me a bit more about Rome, what Rome is and how that works?
Yeah, sure. So Rome came about 10 years ago, recognizing the need for supporting local businesses. Traditionally, at the time when you turn to Google and others search engines, your local businesses were on page sort of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Um, Whereas your big multinationals, of course, with the environment that it was, using search engines, it was very much a pay to play environment. So all your big multinationals were, page 1 to 5 plus. So for me, it was a need of being able to recognize and promote local businesses on an even level playing platform,
Mhm.
getting through the thick of what is the multinational sort of clone town mentality of always going to the same Weatherspoons, Costas, et cetera, to actually where's the nice little French restaurant or the nice little mum and dad cafe shop, et cetera, et cetera. So how did we, it all came out of a need of how can we support and recognize local businesses as places to visit and do business with.
Right,
That being
awesome.
said, we then ended up building a digital platform that did exactly that. It's an app on your phone, free to download, and it does exactly what I just said. It sort of gets away all the big noise from the big multinationals. It's a local first search engine. It pinpoints your location when you open it up, and it will give you all the information based on what's around you, and then we try and tailor that to the user cases too. So trying to tailor that based on your own preferences. Like what does Paul want to do, and why does Paul want to support local today? Let's put those relevant businesses in front of Paul. You know,
Right, awesome.
in a
So,
nutshell, that's what we do.
yeah, no, well, I love the sound. Well, I love what you're doing with it. So, so what? Who's on there at the moment? I know you say local, but is that like is it certain communities or certain locations at the moment, or is it UK wide or
Very much UK wide. Our biggest stronghold, if you like, biggest footprint at the moment is Northern Ireland, centred out of Belfast.
right?
Great economy over there in terms of, they've got great support frameworks. So things like retail Northern Ireland, hospitality, Ulster, food to go Northern Ireland, all these type of industries really playing a great part. And that's where we launched the product, the service, the search engine. And then since then, so we launched that about 5 years ago. And then since then, we've grown UK wide. Uh, Albeit I am based out of Darlington myself in the Northeast, but it's just the way the business journey went as to why we ended up sort of, choosing Northern Ireland um, as a first call to action in terms of this national rollout. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So why do you want to why do you think that
Just
is?
getting back
Or
on.
why is Northern Ireland so supportive of local businesses? Do you think, or what can we learn from that in other areas?
Really great question. Northern Ireland, I think, because it is, let's say, like the size of sort of Newcastle and Durham put together.
Right.
It's got a population of around 2 million people. But
Okay.
within that, there's lots of local businesses or what I call local multiple businesses. So you might have, again, Paul Lancaster that might own maybe 10 to 20 different venues across Northern Ireland. But what you don't get is so much as your big cost coffees, Weatherspoons, things like that. They haven't quite got as strong of a presence over there. So in terms of like for a local platform, it made a lot of sense. Also, of course, we do a lot of work with tourism too. So Northern Ireland, for example, using that as a case study has over 7 million tourists coming into Belfast City alone every year. So again, it's a case of how can we help Northern Ireland, Belfast, or wider UK capture these people that are interested and then help them navigate and provide them a place to turn to in order to discover local, whether it be your local bars, restaurants, your hospitality, leisure, right through to retail, or maybe you're just simply looking for a car park or whatever it is. Like we've got the whole thing wrapped up into a nice platform there that can
Yeah.
Have we just phased out a little bit there?
Okay.
Just pick up
Cool.
on that.
Yeah. Well, I think we've talked before. I've not actually been to Northern Ireland before. I've been to the Republic of Ireland a few times, but I've not been to Northern Ireland before. But I really want to go, and I'm thinking of going at some point this year. So I'm going to be using your roadmap to figure out the best places to go.
Definitely, we've got, we'll show you, for example, Six Nations was on, so we were showing all the locations across Belfast that were showing the Six Nations rugby.
Right. Cool.
We'll show you where all the 2 for 1 happy hour menus are across Belfast, etc., etc. It's all about how we can better connect you to the local place that you're visiting, whether
Yeah.
you're a tourist, a local visitor, or a business person, looking to find a cafe to do a bit of work in, whatever it might be. We're there to
Mm.
try and help support that journey and give these local businesses a platform that they can really be seen and heard on a level playing field. Another way that I like to look at it is, if you go to somewhere like York, you could go down the high street, but you'll miss, maybe 80% of all the like what's available to you there because of just the
Mhm.
way the city is laid out. There's lots of nooks and crannies and things like that that you can go down, little behind main building pathways and whatnot that hide a lot of the offering. Whereas with Rome, what we're able to do is the way that we display all the information is it's very level. It's a level playing field. It's very much like a sort of a David versus Goliath mentality on how we promote and support local businesses.
Mm. Yeah, no, I think that's important because tell you a good example of that. So Edinburgh, I go up to Edinburgh quite a lot. Well, I think last year I was up there about 8 times. No, so some of them was for events, maybe more actually. But in November, I think I was up there 4 times. But I love Edinburgh. Like from the northeast of England, from Newcastle to Edinburgh, it's like an hour and a half on the train. Dead easy to get to. Beautiful architecture, great nightlife, lovely food and drink, but really some really good independent shops as well. But Princes Street, which is the main street that most people go along, is looking a bit shabby actually. It's a bit like run down. And yes, you have some big shops on there, and you have some a lot of tourist shops actually, but the view of the castle and everything is great. But just behind Princess Street, you've got, I think it's Rose Street, which is just full of great independent local shops, bars, restaurants, and it's really vibrant. And then the next street behind that is George Street, which is more of your fancy designer high-end shops. And then on the other side of Princess Street, you've got like loads of independents up there. I think it's Coburn Street, and there's just lots of cool independence everywhere, and that's part of the appeal of going to places like Edinburgh and York. It's you don't go there because you want to go to Costa Coffee or you want to go to Marks and Spencers or you want to go to Boots. You go because it's got something that you don't get locally.
I think what you're touching on there is that you go more for an experience. It's not just about diving into the single cafe. It's about, right, if I'm going into town today, what's the wider experience that I can have? Is there any entertainment, attractions? Is there anything that I can take the kids to? You know, maybe I need to go shopping, do the groceries. Maybe I do need to go, meet a friend. Whatever it might be. I think the mentality as to why people do go to our town centres and city centres these days is evolving, as is high streets. High streets are evolving. And I just wrote down there as you were talking, something around media. I think media has such a huge part to play in the evolution of high streets, yet they perhaps don't recognize quite how much involvement they do have. So, for example, mainstream media would quite happily jump on some trigger happy clickbait material such as Costa Coffee's leaving the high street. Oh no, what a shame. High streets are dying. But what they're not talking about, and this is again a lot about what the work that we do, is what they don't talk about is, maybe the mum or the dad that's opened the new cafe. That's part of that
Mhm.
community identity, that cultural identity. Um, that perhaps, yeah, Monday to Friday they're serving coffee, but maybe Friday evening they're perhaps, helping provide coffee to the homeless or something like that. These real strong sort of community impact situations by people taking to the high street that have an invested interest in influencing and creating this cultural identity that is their place. And
Yeah.
again, I think mainstream media don't do enough about that. I think it's very much focused on clickbait and Costa's leaving so and so, or House and Fraser is leaving Darton High Street, etc., etc. It's all quite doom and gloom. But the reality is, when these places and main, big organizations leave, that just opens the door and opportunity for people to actually live, work, and have the desire to impact the community that they're serving. And it's those stories that we don't talk enough about. And that again is something that I'm really passionate about, and just trying to change that narrative of high streets aren't dying; they are evolving, as they have been for you know the beginning of time, since we started putting up mud huts and things like that. Constantly evolving to where we are today, and we're just at another um, sort of the moment of evolution where digital plays such a huge part in what we do, how we discover things and whatnot. Perhaps the high street hasn't quite caught up in terms of the digital infrastructure just yet. But again, there's so many different playing factors, and one of which I've just identified for you there is the media. The media plays such a huge part in terms of that downward narrative. I think us as a collective, people that are proud of their communities and the like cultural identities of their places, it's important that we keep speaking about why our towns, our city centres are a place to, work, visit, play, and invest in.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really important point you made there. Definitely the media, they're so powerful and influential, and for some people that is their only experience of knowing about a place. I'll talk like from a personal experience. So I'm originally from Gateshead, which like West Gateshead, almost Northumberland. So I've worked and lived all across the northeast and across the UK actually. Like I've operated like all over the UK, but very focused on the northeast region, the wider region. But most of my business activities have been more Newcastle centric. But then I moved to Sunderland just over 2 years ago for love. What a cliche, right? But I moved to Sunderland, right? And I love it. Like I love living here. I think it's a great place to live and work and do business. And what I really like is that there's a thriving independent scene of businesses, but especially food and drink establishments in the city centre, and everything's within walking distance. You've got a great beach. There's loads of unique places here that you don't get anywhere else, right? And I think people are starting to travel from far to get here because it is unique offering. But something else that's really good. There's a lady called Katie Wheeler who's the lifestyle editor for the Sunderland Echo, and she's fantastic. It's not only writing in the paper and online, but social media. And she's so good at highlighting local independent businesses, new businesses, what's going on in the city centre and slightly further out. And the number of followers she has and the engagement she gets is really high. So I think a lot of people could like learn from what she's doing and from what's
100%.
happening in Sunderland.
I have this saying of like, you've got to be the change you want to see. And I think if you're looking at your town centre and thinking it's looking a bit neglected and it's looking, a bit sorry for itself, then we have to do something about it because these are cultural identity places, like you said.
Mhm.
Something I picked up on what you said around visit, going to Sunderland and Sunderland being an amazing place to visit because sounds to me like you've got a nice group, a community of people that recognize that it's a place to visit. It's got lots of offerings and experiences to be able to take part in. And again, as we're getting back to sort of the media narrative, like it's down to us to write that narrative. We've got to lead by example. We've got to, be the change that we want to see in our places to make sure that the narrative is right. It is a place to invest. It is a place to give the people that have grown up there, gone to school there, decided to stay and live and work there, the opportunities. And we've got to fly our own flags. We've got to invest in our own communities, and we've got to, you know, try and encourage all stakeholders. I think from these places, be it Sunderland, Newcastle, Durham, et al, wherever, to
Yeah.
take pride and to lead by example and to help change that narrative of these are places to visit, work, and experience for sure.
Mhm.
And it's great to
Yeah.
hear that. that lady there from the Sunderland Echo is doing such a fantastic job. Um, Probably, makes a lot more sense as to why you see it as such a great place to be. But not everywhere has that kind of support framework,
Mm.
or know where to begin. I guess what we're trying to do is come at it from this much larger umbrella perspective of a local first search engine, giving people that opportunity. But there's so much more that all stakeholders from their towns, their cities, recognizing that this is that their locations, their towns are, again, as I've said it, places to work. They are places to invest in. I think the way, again, high streets are evolving, and the way we work is evolving. This idea of hybrid workplaces where people can work from home, come into the office and whatnot. Our town centres want to be almost reimagined for being able to cater for, yes, those, yes. Here's one, I said it to you before actually, is that high streets, your town centres, they stay with you throughout life. There's so many firsts that happen on the high street.
Mm.
From, I don't know, your parents taking you into town for the first time to buy new school shoes, to the first time you went to, went into to your first day at school, your first day at sixth form, the first beer that you have, or the first night out, to the first time you go Poland. I don't know, so many firsts. My point is, these high streets tend to be a place that have this identity and they stay with you through life. There's something for everyone, but they evolve with you as you evolve throughout life. And again, there's a reason why banks, like Darlington Building Society, Newcastle Building Society, and everyone, these others, are investing heavily into their town centres because they are community hubs. They are a sense of identity for people. We look back in time and think about how proud and passionate people are about their football teams. Newcastle v Sunderland, etc. It's that pride in place where all that began. I'm choosing this team. Um, we're quite tribal in mentality, and I think it's okay, to have this sort of tribal mentality as long as you're open to wider feedback and opening the doors to wider opportunity as well, if all that
Yeah,
makes sense.
yeah, no, totally. So what's we talked a bit about the media, and actually you touched on it a little bit about the if you have, okay, you might have a Costa shutting down, or you might have a local cafe opening up, or multiple local cafes. Generally speaking, what I've seen is that the people who run the local business are very heavily invested in the local community. Like you say, they love where they're from. They want to create a business there. They want to create jobs there. They want to generate wealth that they can reinvest in the local community. And unlike a multinational or a chain where the money will likely leave the local area. So that's one thing. What's your thoughts on the role of local councils?
They
And
have,
I don't just mean giving funding out, because I think a lot of people just think local councils should do more to give money.
yeah, no, councils play such a huge part in placemaking, and helping that narrative for the place. It's a really tricky question because councils have so much red tape, and you know the hierarchy of the councils in terms of pushing things through committees and boards and things like that to be able to get things going.
Mhm.
I think anyone that works with a local authority can say, compared to private sector, the public sector is much slower, right? Uh, so they, what we're trying to say, they have such a huge part to play, but I often feel quite sorry when working with a local authority at the pace at which they're able to go, be able to
Mm.
move forward. It's not necessarily the willingness of the people pushing it forward that are the teams within the councils. They could be full of enthusiasm and wanting to make things move faster, whether it be in with investment or hosting events and footfall initiatives and things like that to town centres. But quite often, what I see is just the pace in which they're able to approach, changes and implement new ideas and things like that. And also, I think there's a fear element when it comes to local authorities, in terms of maybe the willingness to try out new things versus what's traditionally worked for places. I think businesses suffer from it too. Uh, Maybe that mentality is just leaning too much into what's always worked and forgetting about the evolution of the times and looking at new things and new ways of making things work. So it's a really difficult balance. I respect anybody in local authorities that are passionate about, you know, this conversation that we're having today around local places, high streets, placemaking, town centres, etc. Because, like I said to you, they've got so much red tape around them. It's not for the lack of willingness. It's just they can only go as fast as the system allows them to, which can
Yeah.
be really quite frustrating. But that being said, this is why um, local authorities need to also lean and work with private sector too. And that's where we find this middle ground. And
Mm.
this is, just to kind of do a full circle as to like why Northern Ireland for me in the early days of our business journey. It was because of exactly that. There was a really good relationship between the local authorities and the private sector and this sort of in-between sector too of like local policymakers. So I've mentioned them already, like Retail Northern Ireland, Hospitality Ulster, the Food to Go Association Northern Ireland. There's a Hotel Association Northern Ireland. These are all like middle ground organisations that really help balance the progress between local authority and the timelines that they have, and the ability that and the pace in which they can move versus private sector. So again, why Northern Ireland? Because we identified that there's really great organizations there that are representing and helping develop policy for the industry specific. So again, like I said, Retail NI is purely focused on retail across Northern Ireland, which is phenomenal. And then when you look at the sort of geolocation of it all, and you recognize that Retail Northern Ireland is representing the retail sector across the geography of what is Newcastle and sort of County Durham put together, it can be really effective. And that model dilutes slightly when you get into the wider UK. Why? Because it's a much bigger space. You have things, you've got other organisations that represent UK wide, which play a part. But just think about like the FSB journey, for example, the Federation of Small Businesses, and how they started quite small business orientated, but they grew up into quite a big UK wide, bit of infrastructure as an organisation. And then arguably you could say that quite a lot of the traditional values, I guess, have shifted slightly and diluted a little bit and whatnot. Um, what am I trying to say with this is that my point is because they started looking at it as much more of a UK problem rather than perhaps looking at it as an individual regional problem. And that's what I'm. So hopefully, what you're getting from this conversation is that like the Northern Ireland, the Retail Northern Ireland sort of the model is really good for the geography because it's very regional. And I think it's really important to really have these regional stakeholders, organizations, policymakers that can bounce between local authority and private sector to really get maximum effect. And I just think that dilutes slightly when we get into the mainland UK conversation. We've got, yes, lots of local authorities, yes, lots of local sort of real big business key stakeholders all moving, but it's this like regional sort of policy making bit in between, which I have noticed across the UK is sort of slightly diluted or maybe becomes a more of a second afterthought. Yet my statement to it is actually it's a really powerful driver to help navigate and create that better narrative of our regions and our local places. One thing I have seen up in the Northeast, for example, which is the Northeast Hotel Association. So it's good to see that things like this are starting to come about. I mean, the Northeast Hotel Association has been around for a little while, but I think there's more room across the region to bring out more, like retail sectors and everything else. I think as a region, we're quite heavy on the tourism, and our tourism sector is pretty good, being in Northeast. But I think there's scope. What I'm trying to say, getting back to the conversation around local authorities, private companies versus public. There's this middle ground where I think plays such a vital, really important part in just the evolution, that narrative, the balancing between the real harsh red tape that councils have and the the ability that sort of the private sector has in terms of being able to do things a bit quicker. So
Mm.
lots of variables, lots of different stakeholder engagements, and the harsh reality is that it's not just down to one person. It requires a whole lot of thinking, a whole lot of movement,
Mhm.
and a whole lot of participation from the different key stakeholders across the region.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's spot on what you said there. It is complex, and it is difficult for public sector councils in particular to, or regional bodies to do this. Um, but then, and like you say, the national organisations, there is a role for them, like the FSB and the North East Chamber of Commerce and others, because they do provide a voice to the smaller businesses. But then, by nature of being a national organisation, it does become homogenised. But at
Exactly.
least it is an opportunity for the national government to hear from smaller businesses and communicate to both ways. But the regional organisations are important, and you've got different, like, it's like horses for courses. You got your national organisations, you got your regional organisations, you got your pan northern or different, like, larger regions, and then you've got your micro or like local council, and it's difficult for. I can understand, like, it is difficult for, say, Sunderland or Newcastle or Gate. I've seen this firsthand. It's difficult for them to get behind something that happens in a different location
Yeah.
because
I,
their focus is just on their local area.
I think what we're talking about very relevant. I mean, what I'm not saying, what I am trying to do is just sort of highlight how like Northern Ireland are a really great
Yeah,
case
you know,
study of
it's
how
a good
this
example.
works.
Yeah.
What I'm
Uh-huh.
not doing is saying that we don't do it over here in the Northeast because we do. And
It's
just give you an example of where I have seen it work is with Durham County Council.
okay.
They've last time I checked and did some work with them was there was 12 different area action partnerships, and each area action partnership had a different territory. And for example, we were able to do a bit of work in Chesley Street because the area action partnership was able to use the Chesley Street Business Association as that interim to help do some real great work in and around the high street.
That's
And
good.
that's just another. I mean, that's really hyper local activity, right? You've
Mhm.
got County Durham, 12 different area action partnerships, then utilizing those area action partnerships with business associations to be able to do that bit more. It allows councils to move without necessarily so much red tape by using third party. And you see it same with like business improvement districts too. They can be a really good value added asset into town centres. I know Sunderland's got one, Newcastle's got one, and Durham's got one. And I think, you know, just look at those towns as places to go visit experience. You can see that those business improvement districts are validated by the narrative that we have by visiting these places. Sunderland, Durham, Newcastle, they are places to visit. And I think it's because they have got that infrastructure. The business improvement districts play such a huge part. You go to Newcastle and you see the NE1 team, patrolling, making sure that health and safety and public safety and there's no vandalism going on and things like that. I think it just goes to show you that people do care. There's a place for this kind of conversation that we're having today. And, the more conversation that we have like this, and the more we can empower organizations like the Chesley Street Business Association or the Durham Business, sorry, the Newcastle NE1 bid team, etc., and others. There's many out there that I haven't named already, but the more we empower them, the more we can make our towns, or shall I say, organizations, the more we can empower them and organizations like them that have a real focus on delivering for their towns, their cities, their region. The better it will be for us in the long run. We've got to remember that our high streets are the community epicenters, right? They're cultural. It provides cultural identity too. Um, so all these things play a huge part into it, and like I say, the more we can help support business improvement districts, the Chesley Street Business Associations, the retail Northern Islands, the regional stakeholders, the better. And just to touch base on something a little bit different, but again, looking at the Tees Valley, look at how much improvement's been made to the Tees Valley across our region when we got the mayor elected. And that became introduced into the Tees Valley, and Hoochin was able to be able to move in directions that he was able to move in with the sporting organizations and whatnot by,
Mhm.
again, giving power in a mayoral capacity to someone like Ben Hoochin to be able to go and do things and move a bit faster and really focus regionally rather than perhaps just as the Northeast. Um, so what we're saying, I think it's important that you got to look at it both ends of the spectrum. I guess you got to really look at it from like a quite tribal mentality of like how can we make our place, our town better, but then also you got to look at it quite regionally too in terms of like the work that we're doing in Darton and the work that we're doing in Newcastle, can they work together somehow so we can push people around the region? So
Yeah.
for example, people come into Darton, it's the gateway of the northeast. Then they might be pushed into Durham because of the Kinrin, offering,
Mhm.
and then from Kinrin into Durham because of the cathedral, and then from the cathedral perhaps we push them up into Newcastle so they can see the castle, the history, the heritage. So there is this understanding of how can we for me being a Darton resident, how can I improve Darton? How can I get behind, Darlington, etc.? How can you get behind Sunderland? But then there's more of a collective approach as well of how can we look to move these people around, the people that do visit, the people that do have the you know the ability to go out for the weekends, spend money locally, etc., etc. How can we move them around the region too to make sure that we're all aware of all the great experiences and things that we can have? And then as in life, as in business, if I have a really great experience visiting Kinrin or Newcastle Castle, or go down to the marina in Sunderland onto the coastal side, if I have a really great experience, what am I likely to do? I'm likely to tell people about the experience that I had, and then word of mouth gets out. And next thing you know, you're now visiting these places, etc., etc. And especially with the likes of social media and whatnot, the ability to share these stories, share these moments with people.
Mhm.
When we geared up now more than ever, we have now more than ever before to be able to really help shape narratives of our local identities, and our towns and cities as places to visit and work and invest, etc.
Mhm. Yeah.
I'm quite optimistic for the future when it comes to this sort of next step in evolution of high streets, small businesses, local sort of mum and dad shops. I'm really quite optimistic. I think the future is local. I think we're
Mhm.
seeing that. Um, if you were to go back 10 years ago from the moment we started this, you can see the shift in mentality in terms of 10 years ago, you could have gone from town to town and called them clone towns. They all look very similar. They all have the same offering. There's a McDonald's, a Costa, a Starbucks, a Weatherspoons all on the high street, Whereas now, again, you're seeing that evolution, from that 10 years ago, that sort of, pay to play mentality that I mentioned earlier of big multinationals on the high street to what it is today. A local offering across the United Kingdom, across the UK, is far more superior today than it was 10 years ago. So I feel like we're doing a full circle. I
Yeah.
feel that people are recognizing that it is the local businesses that provide the opportunity to the community, whether they're living, working, visiting, etc. there.
Mhm.
And it's those people that have pride in place. They are the people that are mentally and physically invested in their communities and want to see these places be nice places to go, turn out to visit, etc. And with that, you get some exceptional stories off the back of it. And I think the sense of more empowerment to the community as a wider thing. When you hear about the local mum and dad cafe helping provide coffee and soup to the homeless on a Friday evening or something like that makes you feel, that makes you recognize that it's because of these mum and dad shops that our even the worst part of our, shall I say, the most neglected part of our communities, like the homeless and whatnot, have places to turn to within our
Yeah.
communities, and they are, you know, they're there again. As I mentioned, they are high streets and our small businesses and our communities, towns and cities. They are there throughout life, even
Mhm.
and your highs and low points.
Yeah.
They're a constant, if you like,
Yeah.
throughout life. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned it before. You made a good point. They're always evolving. You know, they're always changing, and there's some big trends have happened over the years as well. So definitely, when I'm just thinking, I mean, I'm showing my age here, right? But like, there's definitely a move out of the towns and cities to like industrial parks where you'd have big offices and people would go there and they drive there, or maybe they'll get public transport there. And if they were lucky, there was some places locally to eat, if not eat and drink, and if not, there was a canteen in the office or whatever. Um, but then thinking about COVID and the lockdown, you know, more and more people, well, not just that, but more people working remotely, working from home. I mean, I'm self-employed. I'm mostly working from home, but a lot of people do work from home. And definitely after COVID, people now thinking, well, I would quite like somewhere nearby that I could go to a shops or get a sandwich or go for lunch or go for tea or um, pick up a few things that I need. And so it's evolving that now it's not just the city centres, it's not just the town centres, it's the slightly further out, more local towns and villages that people want to see things in. Um, and going back to, this is my personal thought. I don't think it's controversial, but I think public sector councils and whatever, they if every public sector worker spent a bit of money locally, like if they went out and, because a lot of these big organizations have a canteen, they have a cafe in the building, and even though they personally might be doing work to support the local economy and local businesses or the regional identity or whatever, if they're not spending that money locally, then they're not really benefiting the way they could. And
Yeah.
so I think public sector staff, not just the funders, but every single public sector worker could do a little bit more
Definitely.
to spend money in the local area. Um,
I think
just
also, sorry, Klaus, I interrupted there, but I think what's resonating with me is some work that we're doing at the moment where we've, you know, between Down and Durham, Newcastle, we recognise that, that basically that main train line that goes through them, easy accessibility and whatnot, and then this world that we're living in where it is sort of hybrid, remote working, maybe 1 to 2 days in the office, and so something that we set up is the First Connections networking events, and that is very much sticking to high street based local businesses. And what we're trying to do here is try and bring the business communities of Downton, Durham, Newcastle back to the town centres a little bit more.
Mhm,
Whether it's just for a coffee morning once a month, just for a bit of networking. But what we're doing there is we're changing our high street venue location every month. So again,
mhm,
we're moving businesses, owners, and business professionals around the towns, up and down the northeast, in a way that showcases the region and the local offerings that we have. So again, we can start pulling these, because I think COVID was a really tricky one. I think a lot of people actually subconsciously haven't, and I'm one of them, hasn't fully recovered from that. That time of being so isolated, when actually, we've mentioned it a couple of times already, we are quite tribal in our behaviors, in our thinking and whatnot. And when you get isolated for long enough, you feel the effects of that, don't you?
mhm,
And again, so I think helping people work better by reminding them that you don't have to be so isolated. There's some really great cafes or places to grab a bit of lunch and whatnot whilst you're out there. Break your day up, etc.,
mhm,
etc. See the offering, and again, it's one of our missions just to try and bring that business community back into the high street a little bit, whilst also being able to showcase the northeast sort of local offerings, venues that are willing to, of course, host us and have the capacity to do so. But
yeah.
hopefully, you see the logic there, of bringing business professionals back into our town centres, back into our high streets, to be able to you know, to work in a cafe for a couple of
Mhm,
hours, or something like that. But just, spend £3 buying a coffee. It goes a long way.
mhm, mhm. No, I think it's great what you're doing, and definitely some of these places that you're using, they might be really busy on an evening or a weekend, but during the week or certain days of the week, they might be really quiet. So some extra bodies in there, maybe. I think the last one you had like 40, 50, whatever. Good turnout at your last event or your first event in Darlington. That's people that wouldn't have been there otherwise. You've given them a reason to come together, and then some of them will have spent money and that's gone back into the local economy. So it's really, really important that you're doing stuff like this.
And the biggest thing off the back of that, like I say, we had about 30 to 35 people at the first event, but I would say a good 90% of them came to the event and said, "Oh my God, I never even knew this venue was here. I didn't know it existed. What a lovely place it is. I might come here next week for, with my family or whatever it is." So
Good.
again, I think as humans are like we just don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
But you've got to also put yourself in the positions to try and learn, right? And again, I think this is a great platform. Thank you for having me to be able to have this conversation and bring these thought processes into the platform ecosystem. But I think it, like I say, our town centres, they are cultural. They are a place of identity. They are the place that we work, we do business, we play. They stay with you throughout life. The offerings evolve, and it's just about reminding yourself that pride in place is a good thing. So, tribal mentality with boundaries around that is a really good thing too. Um, in the sense of what we're talking about today, I mean, and then like I say, just having that learning mentality of like, I don't know what I don't know. So join us at an event, come find a local place on the high street that might now become your new favorite, coffee spot or something like that. Yeah, it's
Mhm.
worth investing into especially if you live there. It's worth investing into the places that you live because again, it only opens up the opportunities for both work and for the people that live there.
Yeah. No, totally.
As you touched base on we've talked about councils and things, and this is one for you. So we talked about local authorities. We talked about a little bit around obviously high streets and whatnot. But one thing we haven't talked about is the sort of erection of so many shopping parks
Yeah.
across the country. And again, this now I'm going to talk about this sort of quite freely. I don't know what the right answer is, or what I haven't quite figured out myself yet. But we also mentioned about how we've sort of done full circle with the high streets of big organisations being there, then sort of doing the full circle back to more independence. But these
Mhm.
shopping parks are a really interesting one because I think at the time when they were sort of trending, if you like, I'm sure a lot of the user cases made a lot of sense for shopping centres to be moved out of town centres into big open spaces where you can get access for parking and things like that, which makes sense. But the hindsight of it all, and again, I'm not sure where I sit with it and whatnot because, councils all across the country built these big shopping parks. And then once they built the big shopping parks, so many of them scratched their head and said, but why aren't people coming to our town centres anymore? You
Mhm.
know, so I think I'm not saying the big shopping parks and things are a failure to the high street. It's definitely an evolution. It definitely provides more opportunity for people to get free parking, things like that. But I
Mhm.
think it's okay for local authorities and key stakeholders to say maybe that shopping park idea didn't work out quite how we expected it to.
Mhm. Mhm.
Maybe pulling everybody out of town wasn't the complete answer. Maybe just part of the answer. You know,
Mhm. Mhm.
and especially when they're doing the full circles of then saying, well, why aren't people coming to our town centres? How can we support our local high street businesses a bit more? You know,
Mhm.
shopping carts and things like that
Yeah.
played a huge part. I don't know how I feel on them right now. I think
Yeah.
they they play a part,
It's
but
tricky. Well,
yeah, it is tricky. This back and forth.
I'll give you a very real example of this, right? So, like I say, I grew up in Gateshead, and then the Metro Centre is huge. At one point, I think it was Europe's biggest shopping centre. Definitely the UK's. I don't think it is now, right? Now, I like the Metro Centre. I grew up going to the Metro Centre, but I prefer going to Newcastle, right? Now,
Yeah,
the reason I prefer going to Newcastle is because I love the architecture. It's just a nice environment to walk around. I like being outside in the fresh air. There's some unusual, different shops and bars and cafes there. But Metro Centre has a good selection as well, and sometimes it is much more convenient to go there, especially because it's free parking. Now the parking is definitely an issue, right? Because when the Metro Centre was built, Gateshead Town Centre died, definitely
Hmm.
died, because why would you go to Gateshead town centre when you can just walk or get the metro to Newcastle or drive to the metro centre? So definitely, Gateshead town centre is dead. Basically, they've put a new Tesco there. They've got a cinema. They've got a Costa. They've got a few shops. They've tried, and that does help a little bit, but the rest of the town centre is just dead, right?
Yes.
But, sorry. And then in Sunderland, much as I do think Sunderland's great and it's on the up and it's a bit of a big resurgence, lots of good stuff going on. Bit like the Metro Centre. Have you been to the Metro Centre?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So the Metro Centre, the way it's designed, you have these like anchor tenants at the end of each quadrant. So you'll have like Marks and Spencers at one. It used to be Debenhams, but I think it's now Sports Direct, and you'll have the cinema somewhere else. You've got Primark. These are like big tenants that people flock to, but then you fill in with the smaller shops and some independents, some chains, right? So in Sunderland Town's city centre, sorry, although there's lots of independents, people do still like going to places like Marks and Spencer. I like Marks and Spencer. Sometimes you
Yeah.
just want some nice food from Marks and Spencer's, or you want to pick up something from there, right? Or pick up some flowers or whatever. Well, Marks and Spencer's moved out of Sunderland city centre, and they moved to the Galleries, which is like a mini Metro Centre in Washington.
Hmm.
So there's now the Metro in the Galleries. You've got the main galleries, the little mini Metro Centre, but you've got a new part which has got I think it's got Pets at Home. It's got an outdoor mountain outdoor centre. It's got Marks and Spencers. It's got Next. It's got Aldi, and it's got another shop all in a row, right? That has definitely affected Sunderland city centre, because people are now driving to the galleries, getting a lot of what they want there, and they're not going into the town centre. And one of the major reasons, even Marks and Spencer said this, one of the major reasons they chose to move out was because of parking, because it was too expensive to park in the city centre, or the price was increasing. So people were choosing to drive to the galleries because it was free park, and they choose to go to the Metro Centre, whatever. And
I,
the tricky thing is the council have had their budgets cut nationally, so they're now trying to recoup some of that money through parking, and it does have a real
yeah.
detrimental effect.
Yeah. A couple of thoughts that you gave me there, Paul, is
Sorted
getting
out,
onto the shopping.
sorted out,
Yeah,
Andy. You're
well,
gonna
well,
like
to be
free
honest,
parking for everyone if they use the road map. Is that what it is? Is that what it is?
well, maybe one day we'll see, won't we? But you gave me a couple of things to think about there, and you actually helped me sort of have a clearer picture in my own head around it. And I think you touched base on the saying horses for courses. Now, one thing we're seeing in these big shopping centres, and shopping parks is you get the bigger brands going there,
Hmm.
which is fine. Maybe that's the horse for that course.
Yeah.
Whereas what you said, you love going into Newcastle, Sunderland, Durham for the architecture, the sense of belonging, the other offerings, the local businesses. There's two different offerings happening simultaneously. I guess one thing that, and we're probably seeing it a lot in our region because we're quite a rural region, I guess, if you
Hmm.
don't have a car, it can kind of, minimizes opportunity to some extent. But you think about, I'm going to be a bit scatty and then pull it all together. But then you think about, places like Newcastle, dense city centre, and then go to the very extreme of the UK where, London, very dense city centres where people are living above the offerings. So I think horses for courses. I think shopping parks have a place. They have a convenience stand. They have a place for that kind of processes and requirements that people need, easily accessible car parking, etc., etc. But I think what we are seeing is that town centres and city centres are actually becoming again places to live, not
Hmm.
just visit, but actually places to live. And
Hmm.
in the same way that you're going to have shopping parks for car parking and easy access, you're going to have local offerings under city centre, in the city centres under the living accommodation for people
Hmm.
that don't need to drive, don't need to, that are happy getting on the trains and the buses, things like that. So I think they both have a part to play. And again, it's interesting to see how quite different offerings they are. You go to a retail park, and there are, again, it's the big multinational businesses that are kind of taking front stage there. But then you go into, again, let's go to Durham Town Centre or Newcastle Town Centre, and you actually have a lot of local businesses, and that seems to be the lifeblood. So horses for courses, I think they both have a place for existence in terms of helping with convenience and whatnot. And then, you touch base on M&S. I'm a big advocate for small businesses and locally owned businesses, but that's not me saying that, M&S and other players don't have a role to play in that. Being able to get your shopping in and everything else is still part of that experience. It's still a requirement and a necessity. Yes, you might like going to the car cafes and the escape rooms and maybe the bowling alley and whatever else the town centre might have. But equally, you need to eat. You need to be able to do your shopping. You need to be able to do your you know budget type, perhaps little exploration. Whatever it might. So horses for courses is something that I'm taking away from this conversation, and you've put me at ease a little bit today in terms of, is there a need for shopping parks? I think there is. Like I say, I think as long as we recognise that they're two different creative spaces for different purposes,
Yeah.
and as long as we can make them almost communicate with each other, and it's not turning the narrative away from the high streets and the local businesses and the small businesses. I think you know everything that we've talked about there, there's some real great ground somewhere in the middle where we can happily talk about the success of retail parks and things like that, and how Costa Coffee's left Durham city centre. Not that it has, by the way. This is all just me making stuff up in terms of proving a point. But let's say Costa did leave Durham city centre and go to a retail park. Well, actually, that only offers more opportunity for a local business to come through and be part of that high street and cater for a different purpose, different needs, etc., etc. So as long as we don't lose our narrative as high streets, like what am I trying to say? As long as the narrative isn't high streets are dying, and the narrative is they're evolving, and there's lots of opportunity for people that want to be there and want to sort of take that horse into that course, if you like, as well as the narrative around retail parks being positive too. I think it comes down to that. We've got to make sure that the narrative is right and it's celebrating. It's not always doom and gloom. It shouldn't be all about clickbait, which is tricky because I know mainstream media are all about the clickbait. They want views, they want all that kind of stuff. But there's got to be a point, I guess, where business has to be responsible too, and say, hey, almost take our approach of we've got to level the playing field a little bit in terms of narrative. It can't just be doom and gloom, clickbait mentality. We've got to talk about how great our communities are, how great the stakeholders who are, investing in our communities are, etc., etc. Which is why I think people, organisations like the Northern Echo and other local, uh, media outlets and things like that, again, play such a huge part. But again, I keep coming back to this whole horses for courses mentality. It's all there. It all serves a purpose. It's what purpose do you need it to solve at the time? And again, I think just as long as we can underpin it with positive narratives rather than negative ones, I think
Yeah.
I think the future for SMEs, small businesses, high streets, and as places to visit is bright. I think it's a good one.
Yeah, no, it's spot on. There's definitely, I think most people, if you ask them, they would prefer to have a thriving high street and they'd like to see local businesses, but whether they're actually spending money locally is a different thing. So I would encourage anyone who's watching this or listening to this to just stop and think, like, could I spend a little bit more money locally, or could I, instead of going to like a chain or a big organization, could I go to a local cafe or restaurant? So I mean, I do, there is trust there, it's like, okay, I know what I'm getting if I go to Costa, or I know what I'm going to if I'm Marks and Spencer's or Starbucks or whatever. But if I have a choice, I will always prefer to go to a local independent. But sometimes that choice just isn't available, and especially if you're traveling, you just need something to so you'll go to the out of town or the service station or something like that. but yeah, encourage everybody who's watching or listening to this, or anyone who's reading, because there's going to be a blog about this as well, to consider spending a bit more locally. I'm very quickly going to touch on this. I know we talked about before we went live, right? I don't normally talk about politics, right? But I am going to talk about this, right? Because I think a lot of people are concerned about the rise of reform and certain sort of polarizing opinions, right? But I listened to a good podcast recently. It's The Rest is Politics, which is normally hosted by Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell, which is interesting because they're like, one's left, one's right, but they're kind of middle ground. But they talk a lot about global politics and economics and stuff. But they've just done a 20-minute podcast, Alistair Campbell and a MP called Liam Byrne, about the rise in populism and why parties like Reform have had a big rise in popularity. And one of the things that they talk about is that when New Labour was in power, there was a big push for globalism, multinational globalism as the utopia, and everything was going to be great. Everyone was going to have an amazing life if we went down this route. And a lot of people locally are thinking, well, I'm not feeling the benefit from this, or my high street has died or is dying, or it looks like it's dying, and that social cohesion's been lost. So certain politicians are tapping into that for their own gain, and they're exploiting that like sense of loss and that local tribalism, like you say, or patriotism, or whatever you want to call it, and it's been manipulated a little bit. But I would say that every politician, every political party could do more to support. If they were seen to be doing more to support local independent businesses, that would be a vote winner. So I'd encourage
I think,
everybody, every political party, to do that.
yeah, I think just on that, adding an extra layer to it, Paul. I think the party that can find the balance between both will be, you know, the one that takes us further forward
Mhm.
in a more proactive way. I think there is this sense of global, that global mentality where the world is becoming a much smaller place because we are becoming more and more connected all of the time. And
Mhm.
it's okay to start thinking like that. I think there's logic in that for sure. But we've also got to recognize that, again, keep coming to the word of this tribalism, this sense of pride of place. Why do people support their favorite rugby clubs, their favorite football clubs, etc.? Is that sort of like tribalism mentality. So
Mhm.
I think the party that figures the balance between, yes, the future is sort of, we all love each other and it's this global harmony, yes, but also recognizing that also our independent communities and the cultures and the history of these places also play a huge part in that. And it's okay to be proud of that, It's
Mhm.
okay to sort of have to be proud of the place, to value the history of the town or the players that have came out of your town in terms of what they've gone on and achieved. It's that
Mhm.
balance, I think. It's as is politics, it's a bit of a pendulum swinging both ways.
Mhm.
That center approach, I feel, is the most credible approach, and whichever party can find the balance between this global mentality, but also recognizing that it's okay and actually should be recognized and I'm trying to think of a word to sort of accepted to be, oh, it's okay to sort of have a tribal mentality of I love Durham, I love Newcastle, I love, my my favorite football team, whatever it might be.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I've just noticed there, this is pretty cool. So just joined, there's a little comment here. Ethersham Hack, who is the mayor of Sunderland, he was just joined, he started watching, he's just posted a comment saying, I've joined at the right time. So welcome and thank
Fantastic.
you for joining, because he is doing an awesome job. He spoke at the last platform event we did in Sunderland, and did such a good job of talking about why it was important for local councils and businesses to work together and support local independent businesses. And he's done a great job. In particular, the ward that I live in, High Barnes, that's where he's from. He grew up like just around the corner, and he has done a brilliant job of supporting and advocating and championing local independence. So I'm really chuffed that he's joined and that he's commented.
Yeah, fantastic. And again, I think it just comes down to, like you say, just complete cohesion. You know, recognizing that whether you sit on the left side or the right side of the political fence, but if you got, if politics can have more conversations of, let's just agree that this is a good thing.
Mhm.
Doesn't matter what side you sit on. Pride in place, better local economies, booming local businesses, great footfall, great education systems, all these things that most normal people, I guess, can just say, "Do you know what, that's a good idea. That's a
Mhm.
good thing, you know.
Mhm.
It's that cohesion, I think, recognizing that it's whether you sit on the left or the right, it's okay to meet in the middle sometimes.
Oh, he's just left for another comment. He's put, "Thank you, Paul. I
Yeah.
definitely support what you're doing. Get in." But well, and, I'm just talking about a lot because I live here, Sunderland, but I think Sunderland Council is doing a lot of good things. They're doing the big things, a lot of investments in infrastructure and buildings and services, and it's an exciting place to live and work and do business. But also the local independent businesses aren't just relying on them to do everything for them. There is a real sort of DIY mentality, or a bit of a, it's been described to me before, a bit of a punk mentality where it's like, look, we're just going to do our own thing here, and that's what makes us unique. And I think when you've got the two groups together, it's symbiotic. It's like if everyone's playing their part, and then the people who aren't running businesses, aren't in the public sector, are spending money locally. Like if they're choosing to go to that local pub or cafe or restaurant or local shop, whatever, we're all going to benefit from that, and they're going to be better places to live and grow up with, and it's better for the local economy, the regional economy, the national economy, if everyone's doing this.
And I keep coming back to the opportunity, the opportunity for the people who live and work there as well. I think our region, and to be honest, a lot of regions outside of London suffer from, when it comes to employment, so many people, so much of the top talent from a region end up leaving the region to go on to, to bigger and better things kind of thing, and then end up coming back. And it's recognizing that actually, if we can celebrate our places, make sure that people are aware of the opportunity that is available to them, and we
Mm-hmm.
might be able to hold on to a bit more of that talent. And then, talent breeds more talent, and talent then creates more opportunity. And again, the opportunity is there for people to tap into who live and work there, etc., etc. So, it's a it's a full circle. It's a very difficult one. There's so many different playing parts to it all. And I think I just come back to the sort of one statement of it is community cohesion. It's okay doing your own thing, but making sure the wider community is aware of it too. And like say, strategic partnerships and people like the retail Northern Islands that come into play. It's such a minefield. But I think as long as people in this conversation can approach it with like place first, not politics first, not favoritism or anything like that, but just like place first. Like, is what we're doing for Sunderland today a good thing for the people who live, work, and want to invest here?
Mm-hmm.
If we can tick those boxes, the
Yeah,
chances are it's going to provide more opportunity for the people who live, work, and
yeah.
play there.
Yeah, and I think the whole of the northeast of England will be stronger with a strong Sunderland and a strong Newcastle and a strong Gateshead and a strong South Tyneside and a North Tyneside and Durham and Middlesbrough, Darlington. We're all going to benefit if locally we're too small, but collectively we're a really strong region, and we will all benefit from moving around and spending money in these different areas. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. I know you don't. You probably don't want to have favorites, but is there one local business that you want to give a shout out to, or you want to encourage people to take a look at, or even just an area like a street?
Yeah, I'll stick more to an area. Being a Darlington-based business, and I've grown up here. I always shout out Grange Road, Darlington.
Okay.
Really, they sort of pioneer a little bit of the culture, I guess, that happens with Darlington. There's great offerings from retail through to hospitality. You're also a stone throw away from leisure facilities and things like that within the Dolphin Centre and whatnot. So that side of Darlington Town is just a really nice place to go for a walk, go see some eatery, have some visit some eateries, maybe pick up, dive into the local retail shop, that kind of thing. It's quite experience led, is what I'm saying. There's a little bit of everything on there, and it's all good quality too. So and some great deals. All right, I'm going to do one shout out. The Juniper Tree, for example, Darlington, Grange Road, they do a breakfast, full breakfast and a cappuccino for a tenner. You just can't argue with it. It's a great place to go start your day sometimes if you feel that you need a bit of energy. So yeah, but saying that, I just love the Northeast as a place. We've got we've got so much value here, whether it be from the historical value to the emphasis on like Kinron that's now spotlighting that historical value, right through to the independent businesses with the opportunities that we have with the main line going through Dartford, Durham, Newcastle. Uh, yeah, it's just I have had opportunity in my life to pick up and move, and I never have because I love the Northeast that much. It really is such an amazing place, whether, like I say, to live, work, and just continue to experience. Feel very privileged being here. The
Yeah.
Northeast generally, where are we? If you live somewhere in the Northeast, you've got sort of three national parks all on at your fingertips, amongst multiple towns, multiple cities. You got the coast, you can go to Whitby for some fish and chips, whatever it might be. The Northeast as a place is worth visiting and
No,
investing in.
yeah. Well, I share your passion and your love for the region. I mean, I've benefited from traveling and working all over, but this is where my home is, where my heart is, and it's the northeast of
Exactly.
England, and that's why I've been doing what I've been doing for, well, my own business 10 years has all been focused on the northeast of England, promoting it as a great place to start and grow a business, and that's what I primarily still do
Allow
now.
me to give you a shout out as well for all the
Go
amazing
on
work
then.
that you
Thank you.
do in terms of helping small businesses and given, the platform events and everything else that you do in terms of being able to have that cohesive space with no barriers to entry to be able to come, experience, communicate, talk about problems, and have the platform to have conversations like this today. All of this plays a huge part in making the Northeast a place to invest in.
Thank you. No, I
Shout out to
appreciate
you.
it. Really
Yeah.
appreciate it. So just, I guess we'll just end just by saying a bit more about Rome. Like if a local business owner is watching this or listening to this and they want to know how to benefit from what you're doing, what's the easiest way to do that?
Awesome. Two things then. On the Rome journey, as mentioned, we are a digital high street experience or a local first search engine. It's free for consumers to download off the app stores, and you can just tap into local, businesses wherever you are. It tailors the information based on you, your interests, and where you are in terms of where you're visiting, be it Downton, Durham, Newcastle, etc. Um, so yeah, free access, download, start finding local eateries and local businesses that are on your doorstep that you might not have even heard of beforehand. Start
Mhm.
experiencing, share them, share the love, back them, um, go buy a coffee with them or whatever it is. And then for businesses, we do provide businesses, again, completely no barriers to entry on this, the ability to activate their profiles within the platform, the Room platform. They're already being promoted. So we provide businesses again, no barriers to entry, the ability to go forward, activate their listing, then shoot on any news, offers, events, deals, discounts, anything like that. Um, all accessible by the app. So whether you're a business owner or just a consumer, go and find the app, find your business. From there, it's very nicely signposted as to how you can engage with it, whether you're a new user or a business wanting to engage with us and throw promotions and offers through there. So do that. And then my final message is we've launched something called First Connections Networking, which is, as I mentioned, creating a Darlington first, Durham first, and Newcastle first free barrier to entry networking events, which is based around town centres, trying to encourage local businesses and professionals to come back to the high streets, not necessarily to open up office and things like that, but just to engage with, start supporting, find that nice cafe to have a coffee in on a morning, one day a week or something like that. Just trying to help the business community be more aware of the offerings and opportunities that are on their doorstep. So again, just a message to anyone tuning in to tap into that. And hopefully through that, Paul, we're going to be doing some more work with you too in the future.
Amazing.
So
yeah. You've got some awards coming up. Have you got Northeast High Street Awards as well?
That's right. So off the back of that, we've launched the Northeast High Street Heroes Awards 2026 just last week. So anyone can go to the Northeast High Street Heroes Awards website, which is just any-hsh-awards.co.uk. I have to think then for a moment. And they can put in the website's open to all. It's out for a public vote. So anyone from the public can go on and say, vote within the categories that we provide who they feel is their local hero for their region. And at the end of the year, we're going to do a real big sort of nice gala award ceremony celebrating our Northeast High Street heroes through an awards gala. So yeah, thanks for reminding me on that one. Anybody head over to that, put a vote in. Let me know who you think is, deserves a nomination or perhaps even the award.
Amazing. Well, I'll put links underneath this and on the video and the podcast, and there'll be a blog. There'll be a handy summary blog at the end of this with backlinks to all your sites and social media channels as well. Before I forget, I'm going to quickly give a shout out. There's so many to choose from, but just around the corner from where I live is a lovely cafe and called Sana Soul Food. So they do like healthy breakfast brunches, just unusual, like different types of food and drink, but all very healthy and satisfying and good for you. So I think I'm going to go and get coffee from there now after
I was
this.
going to say, and another poll just for you as well, where the platform event is in Newcastle, out of the hotel. If you start heading yourself into town, and just before you hit that bridge, where you can go under the bridge. Now, I'm not going to do it a favor because I can't remember the name exactly because I've only been once, but there's a really great deli sandwich bar. So if anybody's popping along to your platform events, because they finish at about 1 o'clock, it's a perfect spot to be able to go just grab a sandwich before you push on. I'm sorry to whoever owns that because I can't. Forgive me, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it's just where that bridge is. You can't miss it.
Yeah,
it's really great sandwiches.
Good shout. Yeah, I'll have to remember what it is, but I know exactly where you mean, and I've had some great sandwiches from there before.
Like a New York deli sandwich there the other week after your event, and it was just superb.
Amazing. Yeah. Right, Andy, thank you very much. Really enjoyed that. Keep doing what you're doing because I think it's really important, and I'll support in any way I can. So
thank you, Paul. You too, and thanks for giving us the opportunity to speak today. Appreciate it.
Okay, cheers. Thank you. Cheers. Bye.
Now.